All right, everyone. Welcome once again to this Thursday night. It is time for free for all, as it is always, I should say. This is your host, Big John, alongside my friend and co-host, Mr. Hodey Johns, the Hode Man. Hodey, how you doing? You left me high and dry last week, but we managed to have a good show with the newly elected chair and vice chair of the Colorado Libertarian Party, Mr. Keith Laube, and also Doug Jones. Hodey, you disappeared on me, brother. Where'd you go?
Oh, I just didn't feel like being here anymore. No, I just did that thing where I I touched something because I was grabbing a drink of soda, and then I disappear.
Oh, I don't want to hear too much about any jiggling. I don't know if that's appropriate for our type of show, but I'll just fill up some dead air using my professional broadcast radio experience, guys, to fill up the dead air while Mr. Hodey manages to get back online. Welcome everyone to our show Thursday night. We've already got some friends in the chat. Here's Terry from Are You Smarter Than a Politician? Terry, glad you could join us. One of the nicest people around, Terry. Always glad to have her in the show. Hi, Terry. And I'm coming off, Hodey. I fell. I was not able to defend the belt on this Tuesday night on Are You Smarter Than a Politician? I came in second to some really great competition. So hey, but it's all about having fun and spreading the word of liberty a little bit.
You and I both now have a gold medal and a silver medal.
A gold and a silver.
Aaron, what up now?
Woot,
just came from his
woot.
book club. Awesome book club, by the way. If you're ever interested, ask me or Aaron for an invitation. We actually read during his book club. So if you're one of those that you're just like, I don't need more homework, we won't give you homework. We read and discuss right there. Me or Aaron.
But hey, listen, I take advantage of these book nerds, folks. If I always give Hodey stuff to read, so you take advantage of your book nerd by supporting their book clubs. Absolutely. And Terry, who's also watching us on X, she's saying hi, sharing on X also. Thank you so much for sharing, Terry. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We love the support from our viewers and our listeners. Thank you so much. If you are thinking about watching us and you came across us, you can find us on X, YouTube, and Facebook. We're there all the time. And please spread the word. Follow at Distant Warrior. That's our new home, at Distant Warrior, all one word. And you can find that on YouTube, X, and Facebook. This time I made sure, Hodey, when we got a name, it would be the same across everything. So there you go. At Distant Warrior. Oh, and it's our friend Free also joining in. He says, hey guys, thank you, Free. And again, I can't emphasize this enough, folks. Are You Smarter Than a Politician? Great game show. I was very upfront with Free, Hodey. I said, I'm ripping off your idea, Free. I'm gonna steal this great idea you have for this interactive game show, and I'm gonna try to come up with something on my own. Not on my own, but our own version of that game show. So Free is already he's sort of like the Dave Attell of internet game shows. He's got all these little game show babies running around, myself and maybe probably a slew of others, trying to propagate this internet game show theme. But if you guys want to see the original, make sure you go check out Are You Smarter Than a Politician? I think it's on Tuesday and Friday nights, I believe, every week. So check them out. Follow them on X. It's always good when the Liberty community gets together and promotes each other. So by all means, follow Free, follow Terry, and join Aaron's book club. There you go. We got it all. I think we got it all wrapped up in the first 5 minutes. And Hodey, it gave you a chance to fix that jiggly wire of yours. Is it fixed? Are you ready to go, brother?
I'm ready to go. I've transferred my soda, my fruit punch soda here, to the right side of me now, and it will remain there for the rest of the evening.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Tuesdays and Fridays, 8 p.m. Terry wants to make sure we say. Also, hello from Florida, Mr. Blue Lou Boyle. Mr. Blue Lou Boyle. I don't know. Is that the same as the guy who was in the Blues Brothers movies? The who is it? The trombone player or the saxophone? Blue Lou Barini. Blue Lou somehow reminds me of a blues saxophone player. I'm not 100% sure there, Hody, but I'm also an old man, and I'm sure I'm babbling at this
That's
point.
Christopher Walken plays
No,
Blue
no,
Boyle,
no,
or
no, no.
no?
In the Blues Brothers movies, it was like the horn, one of the horn players, the horn section of the band, who was skinny, he had long hair, and I'm talking about a movie 40 years old now. So uh, I am expecting way too much of young pups like yourself to recall the Blues Brothers there, Hody.
Okay. I must be mistaken there. I thought it was for. I don't know. I'm thinking of something else. I guess.
It's
Movies.
okay. I'm sure you
Yeah.
are, but that's okay. All right, so let's get going. We have a lot of. Oh no, Mr. Blue Lou says it's a reference from the movie True Romance. Yes, Christopher Walken. So
Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking of the wrong movie. I was thinking of the Blues Brothers, and
Blues Brothers are. That's the better movie, to be sure.
yeah,
But
the legacy right says Blues Brothers FTW. Now, see, I'm an old pro wrestling fan, an ECW fan. FTW to me probably means something different than it means to you, Hody. What does it mean to you?
for the win, baby. And he is
I'm not going to tell you what FTW. No, actually, I think in wrestling, there used to be an FTW championship, which stood for F the World.
And while we're championing other people, apparently this is the night to do just crossovers because
Yes.
Legacy Right, that's Zach. He's part of the Love First Christians. Legacy Right's got their own podcast as well. Yeah, good to follow all these guys who also follow us. We're
Yes,
gonna wake up
absolutely.
one day and find out that all 7,000 of our subscribers are the 7,000 people we subscribe to.
Yes.
So that's just the way
Yes.
it's gonna go.
It's going to be one big love fest like
Yeah.
that. Absolutely. All right, Hody. So, this week we had a little bit of trouble trying to settle on some topics. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the news, especially of interest to folks interested in liberty. As a matter of fact, we covered one of them, me and Mike Termod on Liberty Lens this week. We covered because, Mike at heart is an Austrian economics nerd, so sometimes we just decide we're going to do a nerd hour of economics and policy and stuff like that. And that's what we did for Trump's Asia trip, the negotiations with Japan, South Korea, and especially President Xi. If you want to check out how Mike and I view that trip, the economics, the future, possibly doing something antithetical to the liberty movement in order to get to liberty. And we had a philosophical debate about that. So check it out, Liberty Lens with Mike Termott this week. Go to distantwarrior.com. All the shows are listed there for you guys to check out at your leisure. So let's do that. But for free for all, Hody, after all this blabbering falling out of my mouth, let's talk about Javier Milei. Now, Milei had what I guess Americans would term a midterm election for his party, the LLA, La Libertad Avanza, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I guess there was some concern that his party might lose ground, might cede some ground in the Argentinian government. But much to some people's surprise, I would say to my surprise, I don't know about you, they actually ended up big winners and they ended up gaining a lot of seats. They basically got 41% of the popular vote, or the national vote, I should say. And they became the largest single bloc in the Argentinian parliament. So that is good news, certainly, if you're a Javier Milei fan. Good news if you're a libertarian who wants to see a lot of our philosophy implemented as an experiment, as a test case in the world with a quote real government, right? So let's talk about that. But let me toss it over to you, and maybe you could give us some context, some backstory on why some people, ourselves included, Hody, may have thought that Milei's LLA party may have been in trouble this go round.
Yeah, so they have two midterms and they're in back-to-back months. And one's for Buenos Aires and that province, and the other is for the rest of the region. And the Buenos Aires one happens a month before. So
Right.
exactly 1 month ago, Milei suffered a horrific disaster in the elections. What happened in the Buenos Aires province was a lot worse than what he had expected. And so people were kind of buckled up for this one to be like, oh, is Milei on the way out? And in truth, what we've ended up seeing is that I think much like Republicans and Democrats here, it's like seeing the big cities go further left, and then the red countries go further right, like in the flyover country. And it was just I'll break down a little bit here of why I'll do you the first half and
Sure.
why it was bad. Why like so
Right.
I looked at some exit polling. I interviewed a friend who actually lives in Argentina to talk about I because I was like, what happened? I thought everything was going well. And I kind of did a markup over everything and I ran it through a fact checker. So I'm just going to spit off some stuff here so that everybody's aware what went wrong before we talk about what went right.
Sure.
So spending has exploded in Milei's second year in office. So Milei took the spending that was $80 billion, brought it down to $67.8 billion. I'm sorry, not dollars, euros, pesos. Sorry, it's important to get the right currency here.
Money.
So yeah, less monies, right? So it'd be the equivalent of America spending like 5 trillion a year, and then spending $4.2 trillion a year, which would be, I mean, John, if we would balance our budget in 8 years if we did that, right? Like
Yes.
if we
Yes.
actually spent less, we could keep it flat and balance our budget in 10 to 12
I've
years.
been saying
You
that
know,
for the last 40 years.
I give you all the credit for that because I think it's important for people to
Yeah.
know, right? So for the fact that he spent less was huge. But then, so think about it, it's 80 billion to 67 billion. So that's lower. This year, they're on pace to spend almost double, 117 billion. So that would be like America going from spending 5 trillion to 4.1 trillion to like 7 trillion, right? Like you just be like, oh gosh, like I thought we were on the right track and then we're wrong. The largest cuts have been to social health and welfare programs, and those have helped. So it makes sense with the people that are on the bulk of those programs being from the city, receiving the bulk of those penalties. The government is spending more, almost double what they were spending before, but they're no longer spending it on social health and welfare programs. They're spending it on other things. There is a lot of blatant corruption, unfortunately, for Javier Milei. The National Disability Agency, it's giving out less money. Like I said, there's less welfare going out. But Javier Milei's sister, Karina Milei, was caught on tape getting kickbacks and bribes to herself and her associates from these government contracts. The whistleblower, as opposed to them taking it seriously, got fired, and the government has attempted to delay and suppress this information from becoming public. Argentina's central banks have a massive inflation problem still. You'll see some sources that say Argentina has reduced spending by almost 30%, which is only true if you're adjusting for inflation. Unfortunately, with wages not on the rise, people are seeing the amount of money they need going up and not being on that train as the amount of money's there. I mean, we all know how inflation
Right.
works. The return of big government spending has had really negative impacts. The Argentinian stock market is among the worst in the world and certainly the worst among kind of the second world countries. Wages have seen an erosion. And after a fall in poverty the first year, we're actually seeing a decline, a sinking of the middle class leaking into the lower classes. While it was easy, like it was fun to say afuera. Remember the afuera?
Yeah.
Like, get rid of these departments. So he did get rid of the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Labor, Employment, Social Security, Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity. All those are gone. But instead of getting rid of them, he actually created one new mega division, which is larger than all of those combined, called the Ministry of Human Capital. It's just more power, but now it's in the hands of fewer people, which is the definition of bigger government. Milei claimed to only endorse the Libra coin. For those who remember this was a
Right.
rug pull crypto scam created by known rug pull artists. And he said, I only endorsed it personally. However, evidence was released showing that the Argentinian government coordinated with the rug pull scam. Instead of proving his innocence, Milei issued a royal decree to shut down that investigation into it. Speaking of decrees, Milei's most famous act came by mega decree. That's what they refer to it down here. This worked great for getting rid of things like rent controls, bad regulatory agencies. Like there was some libertarian stuff there, but it also came with some big government actions. It banned or restricted, or effectively banned or restricted, the ability for workers to strike or protest. It criminalized organized protests. It put contracting decisions in the hands of the executive branch instead of the legislative branch. And it allowed the president to have state of emergency powers until the end of this year, 2025. And Milei has been using that power. One such use was the expansion of the police. The police can now detain people for 10 hours for whatever reason they invent without a court order, no warrant, and searches don't even require a warrant anymore. This has been used, unfortunately, against political opponents and critics of Javier Milei's administration. Javier Milei abolished the big government Federal Intelligence Agency, good, but replaced it with an even bigger Secretariat of Intelligence. And this created a surveillance state in Argentina, which is currently at Milei's to command. Before Milei, troops could only be deployed if an official state of siege was declared. And now Milei is using this to he's deploying the troops for anything that he decides is a, quote, strategic objective, unquote.
Right.
And then to get his judges on the Supreme Court, Milei again used his emergency powers, getting his appointees through by presidential decree and not by, the legal system of having them interviewed, questioned, and approved by Congress, by his legislative branches. So that's basically the bad, right? It's a lot of bad,
right.
But that is, I wanted to give people a summary if they're saying what happened last month. There is a lot of good, but I'm leading with that because people do need to understand. I think a lot of these disproportionately impact the big city. If you're not allowed to protest, if you're being spied on in a surveillance state, this is a much bigger problem in a city than it is for a farmer in the country.
Right, absolutely. And like you said, as happy as I am to see Milei at least attempt, you always, if you're a libertarian and you get these opportunities, whether it's here or elsewhere, you're always sort of like cringy, right? Because you're like, oh wait, what if this guy ends up, or this gal ends up being corrupt or a criminal or whatever? I don't know if Milei is corrupt. I mean, the thing with his sister was bad. As far as I know, Hodey, correct me if I'm wrong, it hasn't actually hit him, right? Like, I don't think he was involved in the corruption. It's just that it hit close to home because it was his sister, correct?
Yeah, he was the one responsible for issuing the decree to shut down the investigation.
Shut down the investigation, but he wasn't accused of the kickbacks, right?
No, as far as I know, it was his sister's banking. And his sister could obviously just give him the money, right?
Sure.
But as far as I know, no, it was just his family. I guess he was being corrupt on behalf of, as opposed to himself.
Right. I don't know if that's that much better, but yeah. But,
well, a great equivalent is Hunter Biden to Joe Biden, right? Like we know pretty much who Hunter Biden was doing it on behalf of, but because they're very careful about it, they make sure that they're putting other people under the bus, right? So as far as we know, we can definitely nail Hunter Biden dead to rights for a lot of this stuff. And, you can nail, certainly his sister, well, not dead to rights because he issued, the stop order as far as the investigation goes. Right. But we basically know what happened. As far as him actually getting the money, it's politics. I think that, like you mentioned, Big John, just playing the political game is tough. I am aware that it is a big, ugly system, and sometimes you got to do big, ugly things. If you're going to be playing, you have to play. I hate it, but this is where we're at when it comes to politics.
And I understand, and I want you to chime in as I'm babbling, Hodey, because I want to get your sort of your opinions on this. Mm-hmm. Like getting elected as a libertarian or as any minority party, like I would say the same thing of a socialist in the US, like an actual socialist, somebody running under the Communist Party USA. If you were to get elected by some miracle, you would still have the daunting challenge of you have no other allies in Congress, right? If that were to happen here, say, right? Same thing goes for Argentina, right? He got elected, but he really didn't have any allies in the legislature. So to the extent that he's doing a lot of this by decree and much like Trump, but like if you're a MAGA, except with Trump, it's a lot different in that we have a mature government and his party, and there's already his political party in office, right? We view ruling by executive order, or at least we used to prior to Trump. We used to view that as a negative, right? Like, as a matter of fact, you could probably pull a lot of recent video of Republicans, of MAGA Republicans complaining about Obama ruling by executive order, ruling by imperial decree. And yet we're in this surreal world now where Trump gets on and celebrates that he issued 200 executive orders in his first 6 months in office, more than any other president in history. And I think if you probably added up the first 6 months of every president in history, it wouldn't add up to 200 executive orders. So, things are relative. And, the MAGA people will tell you, well, he has to do it via executive order. Or as our illustrious vice president said, yeah, executive orders are bad when dumb people do them, but now there's not a dumb guy doing it, so it's okay. So, when you kind of fall into that, here it sounds horribly hypocritical. If you look at what's going on in Argentina, can you cut him some slack for the imperial decrees and for the ruling by executive fiat? Simply because there was no other way for him to progress. He had no legislative block. He had no ruling block, no coalition block that would allow him to do this legislatively. Initially, I'm saying.
Yeah, there's okay. I will make the best steelman argument that I can for the corruption. There's no. That's
There's
just
no correct.
right. The Libra pull, Libra rug pull was stupid on its face, and I think the fact that he shut down investigations was just bad. Right? He's a person of poor character. He's a politician, for goodness sake. Come on, we know who he is. But as far as like he's a libertarian populist. And so part of being a populist is doing what a lot of people want you to do. So, for example, in America, libertarian populists generally were immigration restrictionists, even though that's explicitly anti libertarian, right? Because we're
Right.
aware that what people want. So, if I were to steel man what Milei is doing, he's expanding the police, expanding surveillance because that these are the Peronists are the one protesting, and people have kind of turned against the Peronists.
Right.
And so we are, if we don't like them and we don't like what these people have done, and I mean, my goodness, I'm listing the corruption and problems for Milei. Don't even be started on the last administration, right? Like it's
Right.
not even, it's night and day. So while Milei is a person, like I said, a poor moral character, he's
Right.
certainly like he makes the other guys look like, he looks like an angel compared to them. And so the thing is he's going to do some populist stuff. Unleashing the police, even in here in the United States, is generally, unless you do it like Trump is doing, a popular move, right? Like if you unleash the cops, this has even been a Democratic talking point for a long time. Hey, I'm still tough on drugs. I'm still tough on that
Right.
on these crimes. You know, Democrats, that if they can't establish themselves on tough on crime, they generally are doomed. And so Milei, if again, steel manning, not necessarily what I think, but I think if you're a populist, you view him as the populist, what he's going to do is going to do what's popular, unleashing the cops, punishing the homeless, punishing some critics that people don't like, punishing
Right.
some outspokens, the SJWs, right? Like unleashing the cops on them, harassing them. And these are kind of things again that were people wanted to see. People didn't like those guys. And so he's appeasing them with those tactics. But the real important stuff is like economically getting rid of the rent controls and stuff. And so again, the argument is that he has to do some populist stuff because people expect it and demand it, even if it's not libertarian. And and by doing those things, it enables him to do some libertarian things that ordinarily would not be popular. Cutting spending for 1 year before, at least for 1 year, and getting involved in some globalization when we talk about trade, things that aren't necessarily popular to people in Argentina, but are popular, but are libertarian things. And so I would say that's probably the best way to think of what he's doing there.
Right. And on the economic front, um, much like when Reagan took office, I know you probably weren't born then, Hody, but when Reagan first took office, uh, Milton Friedman was his mouthpiece, basically, for the economic policies to come. And don't people forget when Reagan took office, you had double digit inflation, double digit unemployment. The what Keynesians thought could never happen, which was the condition of stagflation, which meant both high unemployment and high inflation concurrently. And basically, Milton Friedman had to explain to Reagan, and Reagan had to explain to the people, we're going to go through some pain. It's going to hurt for a year or two before we get put on the right track. Before our free market reforms take hold, there's going to be a lot of pain. People are going to hurt. And he was right, of course, right? And I think to some extent, people are kind of expected that going in with Millet, that in order to put in these reforms, if he was able to push them through, initially there would be some rough times, there would be some adjustments. So if I'm trying to paint a bright picture of that, he basically took inflation from triple digits year over year, right? And I think in this latest report, as of September, uh, inflation was down to an increase of 2.1% month over month and 31.8% year over year, which to us may sound like a lot as Americans, because we've been fairly blessed in terms of keeping inflation under control prior to Trump taking office, right? But for Argentinians, this is a tremendous improvement. You know, it's a much better. I mean, picture like your $100 bill being so worthless that the bank would have to stamp an extra zero at the end of it. Your 100 peso, and just say magically here it's 1,000 because we can't print out these hundreds fast enough, right? So to that extent, and in some other cases, like getting rid of rent control, which makes housing more housing available to more people, right? Like things of that nature, the free trade, all those are positives. Now, when it came to this recent election on October 26th, he had a couple of things, and like typically, these are things that favor the more zealous political ideology in an election, right? You had low voter turnout. The turnout was 68%, which was the lowest turnout since they've restored democratic elections in Argentina. So because of that, they got 41% of the vote of a very low voter turnout. Hodey, do you think this bodes well for him to be able to now take some of these things that he's been doing through executive uh, fiat and executive actions and codify them through the Argentinian legislature?
Yeah, let's talk about the major stuff that this actually means. His party now, though, like I said, as bad as he lost in Buenos Aires, the win was so great that he now has led his party to becoming the #1 party, and they're no longer a minor party.
They're not the majority. They still have to form
Correct.
coalition blocks, but
They
they
are
are
a
they're the
plurality.
dominant. Yeah,
Plurality is the word. So they have a 41% representation now in
right,
Congress, which when you don't have a two-party system, 41% is huge, right? Like that.
right,
And so he
absolutely,
has led his little party to now the #1 party in that country. By covering 33%, he now his party now, if they back him, and they will, uh now can override veto, because veto was 66%, right? So before he's issuing executive orders, they can't be anything. Now they can actually start issuing legislation. And if he says, yes, let's pass this, his Congress can't tell him no anymore. The equivalent of his Congress, right?
right,
Can't turn him down anymore because he's got the 41%. They lack the 2/3 majority to shut down any legislation that gets passed. So it's still going to be executive order, like I said, because if you don't have 67%, if you're still missing 59%, right? Like it is still not necessarily on board. It's going to be tough to get legislation passed at all. But at least at this point, if somebody says, oh, we issued this thing and Congress says no, that no longer exists. So getting more than the veto power is going to be huge for him going forward. They can actually start to codify things, and they can actually start to codify, even if not legislation, they can actually start to at least give some permanence to his executive orders. So I
right.
say, we are not going to override him and tell him no. And could theoretically he get 50% of Congress? Sure. If he crafts a piece of legislation, 41%, Malay's Trump populist. It's like saying how many Republicans are going to go against Trump, like
Right.
maybe 2, right? So basically, let's just say 40%, even with a little deviation, right, is going to support whatever you propose. You only need 10% from the various other parties. And like I said, because it's not a two-party system, they're not in lockstep. Right. This is not a singular democratic entity you're going against. This is several other parties. So even if the Peronists are just going to say no, no matter what, you only need 10% of who remains to get on board with your legislation. So in that sense, he could actually start passing real legitimate legislation, which would actually provide a lot of what we're seeing now is wild swings from their market, right? And from the political temperature going on over there as he's ruling by essentially emergency powers. But if he manages to provide libertarianism some actual stability, that would actually be huge for the country going forward.
Yeah, and you can see how the rest of the world is reacting to this, right? Because now that his party, listen, being an old Wall Street guy and having worked on the street for years in my youth, there's one thing the market. See, people think the market hate. Some people think the market hates liberals. Others think the market hates authoritarians. No, the one thing the market absolutely hates is uncertainty. Anything else the market can deal with in terms of equities and bonds and things of that nature, right? Like, as long as the market understands where things are headed, they can deal with anything. They'll make money off of anything. It's the uncertainty that they hate. And the fact now that the Argentinian elections are over and Milei solidified his footing, and it's kind of okay for the foreseeable future, he'll be able to get his stuff passed. Things will have legitimacy to them legislatively, and we already see it. The peso rallied. The Argentinian equities market started to rally. It's starting to stabilize a little bit. And that's a positive because if he's really truly open to and I don't see any reason that would contradict this. If he's a believer in the true market, in the free market, every time he spouts a Rothbard and Mises and Friedman, that's what they believed in, right? That'll only help the Argentinian economy. That will help with jobs. That'll help with standards of living increasing, right? So to that extent, this has help. But Hody, one of the things that you see a lot of stuff out on X about, and by the way, for folks, let me take a quick break. For the folks out there watching us, please send us your questions and your feedback. Let us know what you think of Milei. Let us know what you think of the LLA gaining ground in this week's elections and what you think it means. As libertarians, do you feel Milei is representing the movement, the philosophy, properly in Argentina? Please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Just a quick shout out from David. He says, "Good evening, John and Hodey. Glad I finally tracked down the new channel on YouTube." Yes, David, I'm so glad you tracked us down. Please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button while you're on YouTube. We could really appreciate that. It helps us out a lot. It doesn't cost anything but a click, so really appreciate it. And again, thank you for going through the trouble and scouting us out. Really appreciate it. Uh, Hody, so one of the things that also happened was, and this is where I think you start worrying about shenanigans a little bit, which is it was announced that the United States agreed to a $20 billion currency swap with Argentina. Now, for those out there, a currency swap, it's typically you might hear it as an FX swap, a FX futures deal, foreign exchange. Basically just means this: the United States government bought $20 billion worth of pesos, and in buying them, it helps stabilize the currency. They get dollars. It helps them towards their dollarization push. It gives us pesos. Now, don't listen to Besson. It wasn't done as an investment. It wasn't done to make money for the U.S. Treasury. This is where Rubes will tell you, "Oh, look, it went up 0.25%." It has nothing to do with that. This has to do with solidifying Argentina and getting them to play ball with whatever the Trump administration has in mind for them. So, and Hody, so first of all, before we get into the context of the trade, tell me what you think about this currency swap, what it means, and why it was done.
Yeah, I love literature, and unfortunately, we don't have the literature on this just yet. So the devils are always in the details. I will say, I think I can actually. I don't get an opportunity very often to stick up for Donald Trump and company, but this is something I actually can get on board with, or can at least promote in a liberal, I would say a classical liberal way.
Mm.
This is actually a very classical liberal move. What is happening? So if I own a certain amount of, say you and I use different currencies. Let's go back to chickens and cows.
Right.
And I own some chicken, I own chickens, you own cows.
Right.
And I decide to swap however many chickens it takes to get a couple of your cows.
Right.
And then we own that, right? Now, let's say there's a disaster that occurs that may disease the chickens. You care now. You didn't care before, right? But now you care. Or if something that's happened that could threaten the cows, well, now I care, right? Because I'm like, yes, it's, even though it's not going to hurt me as much as you, I'm still going to receive like a pretty nasty knock. Our economy is almost structured on this. Usually it's through debt ownership. What we do is we say, well, what if China sold all our debt? Right? Well, they'd hurt themselves, right? Because now they don't have that dollars, what do you want to call it,
Right.
stability or whatever. And so now they don't have that, but and it would hurt us. It would
Oh,
trigger, it
it
could
would
trigger a
kill us.
massive sell
Yeah,
us, right?
it would kill us. Yeah,
There's
there's
a
no doubt.
reason that nobody does this, because when you've got the gun to each other's heads in this Mexican standoff,
Right.
there's a reason people don't want to pull the trigger, right? It's that whole hope the Russians love their children too. We talk about that with nuclear
Well,
bombs.
it's mutually assured destruction was the old phrase, right?
Economic mutually assured destruction is
Right.
what this is. So what this is this, and you mentioned stability. This is something that now gives Argentina a reason to support American interests, because they
Right.
now have 20, and actually it looks like it's going to be up to $40 billion. Like I
Right.
said, the details are what we're going to need, but they're going to have 20 to $40 billion in American currency, and so they will do things to make sure that the dollar succeeds. So if it's like, hey, can we open up a port here, where ordinarily they'd say, what's in it for us? Make us deal or whatever. Now they might just be like, oh yeah, we want to make sure your dollar's going okay. Open a port here. And likewise, this is the exact same thing on the other side with Argentina. We now are economically incentivized to see them doing well. Now 40 billion to us, you're one Barack Obama bribe away from spending that, but it
Right.
will still be felt to some degree in a way that makes us go, ooh, I don't know if we want to make Argentina upset if we can avoid that. And even just having that, think about what that means with all the countries that we've blown up, all the regime changes we're currently trying to do, as well as all the ones that we've done, to be able to say, hey, look, at least America will look at us and be like, I don't know if I want to make them mad, is huge for Argentina.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like when you trade with someone, whether it's currency, goods, or services, you're less likely to go to war with them, right? Like, where goods cross borders, armies do not, type of thing, right? But in this case, I think it's, if nothing else, when you go past that facade sort of thing, you got to look at it a little bit deeper, and you got to say what could really be at play here. One of the things that I thought was ironic, if nothing else, was that the Trump administration's 20 billion dollar currency swap, credit swap, whatever you want to call it, uh, was contingent upon Milei gaining ground in the elections and continuing to show a commitment to free market reform. And when I read that, Hody, I have to tell you, I bust a gut laughing, because here's Donald Trump saying to Milei, "We're going to reward you for free market reforms." Meanwhile, the Trump administration has shown a commitment to the exact opposite, to crushing free markets and to crushing free market reform, right? He's gone out of his way to do everything that he can that has nothing to do with free markets, whether it's tariffs, price controls, centrally planned economies, subsidies, what you name it, if you can think of it, Trump has probably done it to kill a free market in the United States and with our partners. Um, Talk to me about that. Do you think it's ironic? Do you think it's just virtue, a sort of economic virtue signaling to say, "Hey, we still believe in the free market. Psst, we're still doing things like tariffs and and no immigration and not dealing with certain
Sure.
countries type of thing on the side.
Yeah, I unironically we got ourselves well, I guess with an extreme irony, we got ourselves an economic Peronist, right?
Yeah.
Like in Trump. Like now the Peronists were like big on social justice, right? Social
Right.
reforms. They were nationalist, but
Sure.
within Argentina, they were, they were big on those kind of lefty things. And so it's funny how much social conservatism is a uniter globally right now. We see when we're looking at these elections, right wings are winning globally right now on the social messaging. It's a nightmare for libertarians, right?
Sure.
Like we fought hard to get there, and obviously we're making some severe social regressions. But let's just analyze the temperature of the world right now, right? Like even the Democrats are anti-immigrant, right? Like Kamala Harris famously
Right.
said, "Do not come, do not come." Joe Biden last term was worse than I know people want to believe he was open borders, was worse last term on immigrants than Trump was in his first term. The facilities he opened were remarkably terroristic in nature, that you wouldn't want your kids to go there. He opened one extra facility, and it is a human rights nightmare.
Right.
Um, and so like that's just with immigrants, but when you look at this with trans people, with gay people, with you see Europe right now having ethnocentrism matter to them again for the first time in about 100 years, to say that hey, maybe it's better that our races keep to ourselves. You see that people of different faiths are referred to as invaders.
Right.
Their depictions, you even see people in the mainstream like just like Joe Rogan and Daryl Cooper crying that London isn't as white today as it was like 3 years ago,
Right.
right? Like this is just kind of it's a global thing that people are winning in politically, at the cost of obviously the minorities who they're bigoted against, and it's a unifier, right? Like what we've seen with Trump and Milei, we say you and I look at this and we're
Right.
like, how can these two even be on the same stage? Like this guy over here is talking
Right.
about like Friedman and Mises and Hayek. And then you've got this guy on the other side who would be able to pronounce the name Friedman. He would just be like,
Right.
there's this big, beautiful man, and I'm told that he would love everything I'm doing. Who
Right.
thinks Ronald Reagan is an AI, right? Like
Right.
this, like, you're just like, you are a joke. And this guy over here is like actually trying to like reduce spending.
Right.
What do you two have in common? And I mean the truth is just really social conservatism is that binding, and that is essentially our relationship with them. Social conservatism is extremely profitable in politics because it enables government to get into your bedrooms, to get into your living situations, get into your lives, to regulate cities, to control borders, everything that big government, I mean, this is like Karl Marxian big government has been trying to do. Like regardless of who you think, whether you think it's like acceptable in your capitalist system or not, whether it's right wing or left wing,
Right.
they want to control your social lives. They want to regulate and monitor your social lives. And so this is where Milei and Trump have a huge overlap. And this is where, and frankly, it's uniting some things in about the world. I hate to promote a good alliance as being established on a negative thing, but we should definitely be aware of what the alliance is actually based in, because as you've noted, it's not actually monetary policy.
Yeah. It's not monetary policy. It really is the to your you said social conservatism. I
Mhm.
think you're being very kind and professorial in your description. It really is populism and nationalism.
Yeah.
And it's really, as long as you have somebody else you can shit on, you're good in this system, right? So in the United States, it's the invaders from the South, right? It's if you go to Argentina, it's the Peronists or whoever. There's always a boogeyman, and this type of philosophy, this type of nationalism, this type of populism always has to have a boogeyman that you can point to. And once you take care of that boogeyman, you create a new one. And we see it here in the U.S. In Argentina, I'm not familiar enough with their cultural situation to say who their boogeyman is right now. My guess is it's the socialists, just from the way that and the Peronists, just from the way that I've kind of seen Malay speak. But yeah, that I think is the actual uniting factor. It's not conservatism of the brand like when I was growing up. It's not the William F. Buckley conservatism. It's not the Ronald Reagan conservatism. It's not even the Goldwater conservatism. It's really just this like nationalism, uh, this theocratic type of view that kind of unites you in saying we're not them. Fill in the blank, whatever them is. And I think that actually is what is the more unifying stream, not just in Argentina, but in England, in the UK, and in Poland, and in all these other places where this Trump style of nationalism, white nationalism, is taking place. All right, so Hody, we kind of talked about Milei taking over. That he now hopefully can perhaps, fingers crossed, has this sort of, maybe he can move away from some of his more dictatorial tendencies, now that he might be able to do things legislatively with a Congress that's basically controlled by his party. Uh, do you uh, what was I going to say? Like, do you feel that perhaps what's being set up with this, either through this currency swap or the potential for more economics, stick and carrot, using Argentina as a base of sorts for which the Trump administration can escalate its drug war?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly possible. Obviously,
I mean, that's a thought that popped into my head as you were talking. Like, is this a way for them to sort of ease, not even if it's not necessarily a base of any sort there,
yeah.
like a military base, but just to run operations out of, like whether from a CIA station or something like that?
Yeah, so let's be real clear here. The government doesn't care about the drug war. They don't care if you're all high and drug addicted. In fact, if they got rid of all the addicts, there would be no politicians left in on Capitol Hill. They need people addicted. They need people suffering so that they can be the antidote to that suffering. There is a reason why they have been forever letting the drug boats reach their dealers and then busting the people who purchase from those dealers. They want that criminal system to keep going. So then you say, well, then why are they blowing up these boats overseas? Well, we're going for a different type of thing, and the administration tilted their hand this last week when they talked about wanting regime change in both Colombia and Venezuela, and this is something that they're jonesing for. So it's not about the drug war. That's just, like I said, this is
Right,
not, they don't suddenly magically care about addicts all of a sudden.
right,
And like, this is why they're actually stopping the boats at the source. They are committing international wars and flexing their power in order to, America. We think so often of the times we've directly gone in and influenced something. We look at like Cambodia and Vietnam, and when we put boots on the ground a few times in Afghanistan and Libya and Iraq, and like that's kind of like the obvious regime changing. But most often, what happens is we don't need to send an entire military to go to the Dark Triangle in Central America. All we've got to do is put a little pressure there, right? A little pressure from a 7,000-pound gorilla is still a lot of pressure, right?
right.
And so these guys aren't big, Trump murdered one of the people he murdered was a fisherman. The Colombian government released all the details, confirmed it, that they murdered a fisherman, saying he's a drug guy. But when you've got your own country scared to fish in their own legal waters that they're allowed to fish in,
Right,
now all of a sudden you've cut off that economic avenue. When you cut
right,
off that economic avenue, you will behind the scenes be like, what do we got to do to make a change? Oh, okay, we want this guy who plays ball with us. We want this guy who gives us a better deal. We want this guy who makes these changes. And we'll just keep blowing you up and getting closer and closer to your shores and killing more and more innocent people until you actually make those changes. And that's been the more frequent regime change plan. That's been our more common strategy and tactic that America has used. Now, I think I want to address your question. I think you're absolutely right. Now that we are friendly with Argentina, they're invested in us a little bit. We say, hey, can we open a military base over here? We don't have to work so hard to kill their innocent people anymore. And of
right.
course, we want more people playing ball with us than just Venezuela and Colombia. We've been establishing ties to El Salvador, to Honduras, anything closer to that region,
Right.
um, to destroy them, like to be closer to putting our power over them is going to
Right.
make less of a trip for us, and it's going to make it a lot easier to do, and then make it, John, if it does take boots on the ground regime change, which is kind of
Right.
what they're talking about, it's going to be a lot quicker because we're actually there. We've got an ally, we've got somebody who'll give us friendly airspace. That's huge.
Right.
Argentina is a massive country within South America, so that would be colossal just to have that base. But even if it's not, it's going to make all those little strikes that we do and that subtle changing of the guard that we do behind the scenes. It's going to make it a lot more doable when we are based out of Argentina, and even more than just the base. If they're friends with us, to just be like, hey, mind passing us along a little information? Sure, thanks. Hey, appreciate it, guys.
Well, I think more than anything else, it has the potential to just be an intel hub. If you're running a drug war through there, right, and you're going for regime change, because let's face it, it's a lot. If you're going to war against New York, it's good to have a friend in New Jersey. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's just the way it is, right? So, but like I am not one to trade in conspiracy theories. Am I floating into conspiracy territory here? You got to keep me honest, Hody. You got to keep your friend Big John honest here.
Yeah, I mean the administration already. They just had there was a post just a day ago talking. They've actually been using the term regime change now within the administration about this. So,
Right.
I will just let me make this a real short answer for you. If you believe that the government floats ideas around like that and they're not serious about that, maybe go back to do a little American history that isn't from your public schools. And I think you'll see that when they talk about those things, we do have to take them seriously. This is not anything that Trump hasn't done before in his
Right.
first term. It's not anything that America hasn't done within our last 50 years. Putting this subtle pressure until people vote the way we like or install the people that we like, that's as American as baseball, and we've been doing that since about as long as baseball. So,
Sure. And Terry says, "My goodness, Hody, do you actually believe any government information? I'm in shock."
I know, Terry. I really do struggle with government information sometimes. There are like, I guess, joking aside, I do think there are private contractors within the public government that like can sometimes do some good work, but even that system is so based in like fraud that it's difficult. It really is difficult. So I struggle with it. I do think that if somebody has their own reputational and financial interest on the line, that they will, kind of talk about maybe doing the right thing from time to time. But yeah, it's I generally speaking, if it's a government source telling me something, putting my money on no has turned me into a very wealthy man. So
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, in this particular case, you're also going off of the sort of known history of President Trump, right? Because
Yeah.
he is well known for floating these trial balloons. They turn out because they give you an insight into what he wants to do, and particularly uh, when he does it because he is a populist after all, right? So I think that's the one advantage we have as libertarians is he kind of telegraphs what he wants to do, right? So he kind of telegraphed bombing Iran. He kind of telegraphed all these ridiculous tariffs. He telegraphs the drug war, right? And we only have a very short period of time to try to combat this, because the second Trump is out of there and Vance is in there, like I've said, Vance is much scarier to me than Trump, because Vance is not the fool that Trump is. He's playing the fool now because he's still, he's pledged his loyalty to Trump, right? But once he's in charge, he's not going to give you these little hints as to what he's doing, and he couldn't care less if he's popular or not. That's why Vance to me is much scarier than Trump. All right, so here we go, Terry. They are already saying the CIA is in Venezuela, so they are definitely working in regime change. direction. Yeah, I think I think the CIA is everywhere actually. So not too surprised there. And then she says Columbia. No, we don't think. I don't think we meant the university. I think we meant Colombia with an O, right?
Colombia. I'm probably
Colombia.
pronouncing it wrong. My bad there.
Colombia. Yeah,
Colombia.
I just think of it as where Sofia Vergara is from. Think of it in positive terms, Hody. You got to think of Sofia Vergara.
Is she Colombian?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Either way, she's kind of delicious, so I don't mind thinking about her on occasion. All right, here we go. And the last thing to talk about regarding Argentina is that a U.S. appeals court, sort of like quietly as a subtext to all this, there's a U.S. appeals court that is considering reversing a $16 billion award against Argentina's YPF. Now, I'll just sort of paraphrase this because I don't want to get too much into the weeds. But basically, there was an oil company in Argentina, YPF, that basically had cut warrant deals with investors, right? Saying like, hey, if this company ever gets sold or taken over or anything, here's what our current investors are entitled to, right? So it's sort of like buyout protection, right? So if I own 10% and somebody, let's say, as is wont to do in these second and third world countries, the government comes in and nationalizes the oil company. As a private investor, as an overseas investor, my 10% might entitle me at a predetermined price. Like, okay, you'll get like $1 billion for your 10%, regardless of the takeover, right? Apparently, there was a takeover of this company by the Argentine government. They seized the 51% stake, and a lot of these foreign investors, including American investors, were left out in the cold. They didn't get what they were owed, what they had agreed to, and basically they were being shut out. Because now this is where it gets a little confusing in the law. So I'll just summarize, and if you want, take my word for it. Basically, this breaks it to sovereign law and commercial law. The sovereign law piece says, hey, we can't tell like a U.S. court can tell an Argentinian court what to do, right, in terms of how it handles its affairs. But the commercial piece of it, which means that American interests, investors, brokerage firms, whatever, uh, hedge funds owned a piece of this company. There was an agreement signed in a U.S. jurisdiction, the Southern District of New York. So these American investors and firms sued in New York and had won initially a $16 billion judgment. Now there's news that a district judge, Loretta Preska, in the Southern District of New York, the largest U.S. District there, is they're thinking of rescinding this award. Hody, do you think this is a political pressure to rescind this award, or based on your knowledge of the case, do you think it's warranted that this $16 billion gets vacated?
It's a mess, no matter how we look at it here. As far as like what it actually is, it's tough. So what you're looking at is, like you said, it's a lot of sovereignty issues. It was tried in the US, even though it's an Argentinian buyout of YPF, which was a Spanish oil company, right? So you might say, what's it doing in the US at all? What if you're messing with oil, you're going through the United States, is the short answer to that question, right? And what happened was they did fail to offer, before their buyout, you have to first offer the buyout to the actual workers of that company. According to their company bylaws, that's not a legal thing, that's a company thing. So that's kind of important caveat to this, right? And the company is like, we will offer it to the minorities first. Argentina did not do that. They did buy it on a national standard. So it is their legal entity, the Argentinian government, purchasing this YPF oil line system. And they did not adhere to that requirement from that company, that bylaw requirement. And therefore, the US, and I'll actually agree with Argentina a little bit, Argentina probably did get hosed in the sense that if I break a company's rule, it usually doesn't destroy the entire thing, right? And so having having you owe the entirety of what the company cost, $16.1 billion in damages, for perspective, and maybe this puts perspective in the 20 billion to 40 billion that we're going to currency swap with them. That's about 20% of Argentina's budget back in 2023 when this happened. So imagine if the United States said, oh, 20% of you now owe another 20% of your overall annual budget because you screwed up this sale or whatever, right? Now, they did have to offer it to the minorities. They didn't. We're talking about a lot of this, and really what we should be talking about is what the minority owners who did have those rights with that company, who had their shares bought out without their permission, seek in damages. Right now, we're all just kind of arguing about international law without kind of their input, right? Like if somebody went over their heads to buy this out, then they should have that, and that shouldn't have happened according to the company bylaws. They are owed some kind of financial compensation, some type, or maybe you reverse the ruling and say, do you want to buy this out now or allow them to keep it? Like, let's put this in retrospect. Let's give your shares back to you or something. Instead, they just charged Argentina the entirety of what the company costs, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I will say I understand this judge's ruling. Obviously, Argentina wants this to be ruled in Argentina, which that wouldn't be biased at all. As much as I dislike the United States, obviously there's some bias there. But I mean, basically anybody's going to be biased no matter on how they rule this one. It's complex. I hope everybody kind of understood what I was talking about there. It's as far as what I don't think there's anything actually there. Our judiciary, for all the occasionally terrible, I will say the prosecutorial misconduct within our judiciary is absurd. But generally speaking, our judges, because they are, especially at the county level, elected, and because they have their own reputations on the line, generally tend to do a pretty decent job in making these rulings. That I don't think this person was like trying to send a political message. I just think they were saying that that charging them for the entirety of the company was perhaps inappropriate.
Yeah, and maybe what'll happen, to your point, is maybe they just adjust that award. Like if it's not 16 billion, maybe they actually figure out it's closer to 2 or 3 billion, or whatever the case may be. All right, Hodey, very good. I think we've talked ourselves out on Argentina for now. One last topic that I thought was fun, Hodey. So you tell me if you want to talk about it. Do you want to talk about our last topic?
Trump in Canada? Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So we got some extra time. We'll go overtime here for the folks out there. And again, thank you everyone for watching us. If you have any questions or feedback for us, hit us up in your chat, YouTube, X, or Facebook. I've got the annoying crawl at the bottom for you. Please smash that follow or subscribe button on the platform that you're watching us. It really helps us out, and we'd appreciate your support. All right, Hodey. So something I found hilarious was during the World Series, Ontario ran the Canadian province of Ontario ran a commercial during the World Series of President Reagan speaking. Now, for those of us old to remember, President Reagan used to do what he called almost like the modernization of the FDR fireside chats, where he would sit and address the nation, and typically he'd sit at his desk at the Oval Office and just read off the teleprompter or whatever. And during one of these addresses, which the Canadian Ontario used for the commercial, was Reagan decrying and speaking out against protectionism and tariffs. The reaction to this, to me, honestly, was stunning, and stunning for one major reason. And then after we talk about it, I'll give you my subtle reason for finding this amazingly stupid on the part of the administration. So basically, then the Trump administration and their right-wing troll farms decided that we can't have this. So, Hodey, what was the first thing they claimed? That this was AI. This was fake Reagan. It was AI Reagan. And that the Ronald Reagan archives, I guess, I don't know, the Presidential Foundation said this was taken out of context.
Yeah.
You even had some trolls saying, well, they chopped off the last 55 seconds of the speech, as if a commercial during the World Series would run for 2 or 3 minutes for the entire speech, right? But, so first of all, Hodey, before we get into the context and what was actually said and what actually Reagan meant, give me your thoughts on the initial reaction by the Trump administration saying, hey, this is fake AI?
I mean, just embarrassment, I guess. Like I'm embarrassed on their half. Trump unfortunately got it into his head that was like apparently it was AI. No, that's Ronald Reagan, just giving you a quote. Yeah, I guess that's my initial reaction is just that he was. It's embarrassing in two folds. One, that obviously it's actually Ronald Reagan, that the and this should be a moment when the Republican Party does some real introspection,
I
right?
agree.
Like
I agree.
what made, as we look in history, Reagan has not kind of looked favorably, but the one thing we can kind of look at is, say, Carter's 46% corporate tax on the highest, 70% high individual tax, and 50% individual what they call just the mainstream tax was ridiculous, right? Like his Carter's taxation policy is the reason why we had the worst wipeout in presidential election history,
It was
right? Like
horrible. Yeah.
it was horrible. There was no defense for it, and Reagan was correct in dissing all those things. Reagan didn't always adhere to everything the way he should have, but at least we got these nice clips with it, which is him talking about how these tariffs are wrong and they're not good and they're bad for the country. And so yeah, I think the second part of the embarrassment is just that and I'm just talking initially, there's more to talk about, but just that initial hit you're talking about is these tariffs were implemented like, I guess it's just a second embarrassment because, like, what, you just get your feelings hurt because of an ad that, like, during the World Series, like, oh, I'm raising your tax another 10% because you hurt my feelings. Like, that's not, like, at that point nobody can argue that's economics, right? Like the only defense over tariffs are that it provides some kind of economic reward, and at this point it's just a punishment, and Trump is not
Right.
pretending anymore.
Well, that's the part that I found fascinating. You kind
Yeah.
of skipped ahead a little bit, but
Oh,
that's okay.
sorry.
But that's okay. But that's okay.
Yep.
Because the initial thing, like you said, was that he got his feelings hurt. He raised a tariff on the Canadians, and Ontario had to pull it back and say, "Oh, we're sorry." Wasn't. But there was a lot of ancillary stuff going on. Before we get to the economic piece of it, I thought the reaction of the magats was stunning, which was they first said it was fake AI, and all the troll bots from Cat Turd to Benny Johnson to the usual gang of idiots. They were like, "Oh, this is AI." They left out the last 55 seconds. I went back, I looked at those 55 seconds. They don't help their cause if they included those 55 seconds, because in those 55 seconds, Reagan says, and I must warn against the dangers of protectionism and of tariffs and the dangers of having Congress enact protectionist policies. Like those last 55 seconds were even more damning to the president's positions, right? Once that they started getting the rebuff on that, then they switched to, well, maybe it was an AI, but you have to understand Reagan was horrible on trade. I heard this come out of Trump's mouth. Reagan was horrible on trade. And again, the right-wing troll bots, Reagan was horrible, Reagan was horrible. How you could call yourself a Republican of any sort or a conservative of any sort. And like you said, Reagan hasn't aged well in terms of history for a lot of things, but generally not for his economic policies. Those have stood up well, especially if you're a libertarian, in the sense that he did advocate for free markets. He did advocate for lower tax rates. He did advocate for deregulation. He did fire the air traffic controllers when they went on strike and replaced them with the military. For those of us that lived it, especially contextually, coming off of very, very liberal and left wing economic policies for over a decade, that was the first glimmer of hope that we can get our economy back on track, right? So for this generation of Republicans to crap on Reagan because Trump got his feelings hurt is just stunning to me. And what's even worse, to watch all these Charlie Kirk bots and camp followers. Like I don't even know this kid's name. He must be 17 or 18 by his profile picture. He actually responded to me by saying, hey, old man, you never know. You don't understand what Trump meant. He loved tariffs. I'm sorry, Reagan loved tariffs. I'm like, I lived through it. The only tariff of any note that I remember was the Harley Davidson tariff to protect Harley Davidson motorcycles. And after he did that, Reagan got scolded by his uncle Milton Friedman, and then he lifted it. He understood he had made a mistake, and then and in general, he spoke out against tariffs and against protectionist policies. But once we get past that layer, Hody, here's what I found fascinating. Forget the nonsense that you hear from the Trump administration, from Besson, even from that idiot, that king of idiots, Lutnick over at Commerce. Um, they keep claiming that the president has the ability to impose unilateral and global tariffs due to his emergency powers. That these tariffs are for emergency reasons, because we're being invaded or because we have economic war waged on us. How do you now defend a tariff that was implemented literally because a commercial hurt your feelings? If I am someone with any standing whatsoever in a court of law, this is something I would take all the way to the Supreme Court and say the president clearly, it's not clear the Constitution gives him the power to impose these tariffs unilaterally. That's what Rand Paul is saying. This is congressional duty. It's not an executive power. But the argument that this is under some IEPA emergency powers, the president himself just shot himself in the foot, because he said, I am imposing this extra tariff on Canada because they insulted me. Not because there's an emergency, not because there's an invasion from the north, but because they hurt my feelings. And Hody, now, how do you justify this? Not to MAGA. MAGA is still, they're still on their knees for their beloved leader. But I'm saying, like, if someone were to take this to court, and by the way, this did sort of feed into the Senate with the largely ceremonial vote that they had, again, led by Rand Paul, voting to nullify the president's tariffs on Canadian imports. The vote was 50-4 to 6. 4 Republican senators, Rand Paul, McConnell, Murkowski, and I think one more,
Susan Collins.
Defected, so to speak. Republicans say they defected. Libertarians would say they grew some intestinal fortitude and stood up for these things. And it's largely ceremonial because the House will never pass it anyway, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you feel about this now? Did the president make a tactical error by letting his 80-year-old feelings get in the way?
Yeah, so legally, these are proposed by national emergency. We've had the president implementing all of these tariffs based on national emergency. And so this increased in another 10% is another that he's qualifying as a national emergency. Does Trump get his feelings hurt qualify as a national emergency? Now, look, beforehand, you could say anything's an emergency, right? Like, people are struggling, like, we do have a homeless problem, right? So just say, like, these people are dying and I blame this economic thing. Now I could get into tariffs. There's a comment in the chat that maybe
I'll address it in a second. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah. But, like, essentially, like, people are hurting, and so your solution is bad, but at least you can actually say, hey, somebody starving to death really is an emergency, right? And people starving to death across our nation is a national emergency. You have some basis to actually make that before a court, to say, hey, maybe my solution hurt those people worse, but at least I was correct in saying there was a national emergency. The problem with this is now definitively Trump and said it, that this is done because of a commercial where they say, we don't like your tariffs. And he's like, hey, fine. That is not a national emergency. That is definitively not a national emergency. There's no way you can argue that in a court of law that that's a national emergency. Well, the only way you would be able to legally argue it is to say, well, I said it was because of that commercial, but really it was because that commercial changed something and made it worse, and so therefore I needed the other tariff. I don't know.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, we already know courts have already ruled this tariffs unconstitutional, right? And they're not covered by the emergency powers granted in under IEPA, right? So we already know that. And I think they actually only have till the end of this month, which is tomorrow, to actually try to rescind that court order, those court orders. So the court said, when they ruled against them, they said, you've got 2 months to change our mind, to appeal this, right? So we'll see how that goes. But they've already been ruled like they're not emergencies. And the fact that he then got insulted and decided to tack this on, Rand Paul is correct, by the way. Despite everything you're seeing on Twitter about him being a rhino and whether or not Vance thinks him and Massey are traitors and all this, the truth of the matter is Rand Paul is correct, and he's been incredibly consistent about this. Let's go to that comment. Our friend Terry. Aren't all the countries that tariff the mess out of us just as bad? How do we make them stop using tariffs against Americans? Well, see, that is what's a little complicated, Terry. Tariffs are taxes. We have to stop calling it anything other than what they are. They're taxes, and they're taxes on American people. I saw where Besant was challenged on this the other day, and he said they're not taxes, they're surcharges on the American people. And surcharges aren't taxes, are they? I was screaming at my TV. Yes, they are. Surcharges are taxes too, just like license fees are taxes. You just call them something else, but they're taxes. So the concept of putting up a tariff, the tariff is not paid by the foreign country. The tariff is paid by the American importers. So when Trump says, I've just doubled the tariffs on China, we effectively have 100% tariffs on China or even higher. Canada, we have a 25% tariff on some of their imported goods. Canada is not paying those tariffs. China is not paying those tariffs. We're paying those tariffs, which is why you see inflation rising in the United States ever since Trump implemented his tariffs. Now, is it fair that foreign countries put tariffs on American goods? The answer is no, it's not fair. And it's horrible anti-free market practice. Absolutely. But here's the difference. When another country puts up tariffs, they hurt our American businesses. But keep it in context. They're hurting our American businesses. The foreign country, the country putting up the tariff, is hurting its citizens. It's hurting their ability for their currency to grow in value. Why would the United States do the same thing? The United States is the #1 economy in the world by a large factor. The next 4 largest economies add up to our economy. So when you add up China, China, Japan, I think
Russia,
not Russia,
Germany.
Germany,
Okay.
Germany and Italy, I think. When you take the next 4 economies, they add up. The 4 together add up to the US economy. The Trump administration has done a wonderful PR job of having the majority of people in this country believe, Terry, that our economy is in trouble. Our economy is as strong as ever. Spending is a big problem. Debt is a big problem. The productivity of the American people, the productivity of the US economy is still the greatest the world has ever seen by a large factor. Nobody's catching up to us. China isn't catching up to us economically. So does it make sense that if a country tariffs us, we'll punish all of our people by putting up reciprocal tariffs? It doesn't make sense. I think Ronald Reagan, of all people, had a great analogy. He said, imagine you and this guy are rowing across a river and you're in a rowboat. The other guy stands up and all of a sudden pulls out a gun and shoots a hole in the bottom of your rowboat. That's bad. But on your part, is it smart that you take out your gun and blow a second hole in the bottom of the boat? The answer is no. So unilateral free trade is best. Follow our Uncle Milton Friedman's advice. Unilateral free trade is best. Bilateral free trade is best. Both sides are engaged in free trade. But if one of them is not, unilateral free trade, meaning only one side having free trade, is still preferred to both sides not having free trade. So that's sort of like the Venn diagram of it, Terry. I'm sorry if I got very nerdy into my economics, but it's one of those things that I love. And so hopefully that helped.
If we think about a tariff, it's like shooting one of your citizens and punching their citizen. So it's like you hurt yourself worse, right? We all know that we're shouldering the payment for these. You do take a small chunk of their potential buyers away, right? When you do this kind of thing.
Right.
And so those shipments will have to go somewhere else. So you do a little damage to somebody else, you do the bulk of the damage to your own people. So the idea that we should fight tariff with tariff is like nonsense, right? Like tariffs are bad for everybody involved. And so I think that, because I agree with you, Terry, like these companies that these places that have tariffs against American goods are punching our people, right? Like it's
Right.
the equivalent of punching our people. And we should just be like, boy, that's really bad. You know, I really don't like it when you're doing that. But like you said, what can we do? Well, we either go in there with war and stop them, which we've done before, or we kind of say, okay, we'll just keep doing free trade. And what ends up happening more often than not when you do that is people look at your standard of living and then say, oh, their standard of living is so much higher. I demand that for us. How do we get that standard of living? Oh, by lowering their tariffs and allowing those
Right.
goods to penetrate our borders as well at a reasonable cost.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, hey, I really dislike your tariffs and let's get rid of them. I think Terry's spirit is correct, because I think it's so frustrating to see other countries
Yes.
willing to shoot, and they're willing to shoot their own citizens in order to punch ours, right? Like, and it's so awful. It's just the best thing we can do is focus on our own free market, as opposed, because that will be a beacon of light to others. Like I just think
Right.
that's the best way to do it.
And let's face it, another famous and Terry, by the way, I was worried that I might have been ganging up on her, but she says I appreciate the
Oh,
explanation.
good.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Terry. I wasn't angry at you, Terry.
It's worth an
Uh,
explanation. It's
yeah,
good.
and I
Yeah.
just get riled up about this because it's one of those passions of mine. But I will point out this: um, blockading the Soviet Union and other countries behind the Iron Curtain
Mhm.
did not defeat communism, did not defeat the spread of communism in Europe and in that part of the world. What did it? Getting Coca-Cola into the Soviet Union, getting Levi's blue jeans into the Soviet Union, getting American rock and roll records into the Soviet Union. It's always been said the Beatles, Coca-Cola, and Levi jeans is what brought down the old Soviet Union. That's what allowed us to win. Because once the people got a taste of what free markets and free market capitalism and voluntarism was able to do for them in their everyday lives, not politically, not on the governmental level, but in the lives of everybody in those countries, they immediately clamored for it. They immediately clamored for it. That's why it was such a big deal when Billy Joel went to Moscow to give a concert in the Soviet Union. And that's why these communist leaders, these communist regimes, they hate that's why they work so hard to shut down the internet. That's why they work so hard to shut down a free press and communications, right? So free markets, free ideas, those are the greatest prosperity engines and freedom engines the world has ever known. And that's why I get a little worked up when I have someone like President Trump and Secretary Bessent and Vice President Vance and the king of morons, Lutnick over there. I forget Howard Lutnick, whose only solution is to be bullies and to be bullies with other people's money, meaning the American people's money via these tariffs. Anyway, Hody, I'm done preaching. I took I don't know. Maybe I got the holy Reagan spirit in me, the spirit of Milton Friedman. I don't know. But I just felt I needed to go on that rant, brother. Let's get some final words from you, some final thoughts.
Yeah, markets are great. I think the more we interfere with them, the worse things get. Nothing is perfect in life. Nothing ever will be perfect. I understand wanting to take care of a problem with these tariffs, but I think it's funny that when we even look at like the best intention tariffs just in history and look at how
Right.
those have worked out. When you look at like a keyboard, when we boycotted like American Japanese goods because of like their electronic keyboards or whatever,
Right.
we just look stupid in hindsight, right? Like it was a dumb thing to do. And then we look at the steel thing and we're just like, oh, that was dumb. I just think that at some point we need to look from history and just say my intentions may be good for trying to interfere with the free market, but I have seen the results
Right.
of those good intentions, and I must remember that those good intentions are implemented by politicians, right? There are some things throughout history where I completely understand, like when we talk about like shutting down the slave trade, obviously, like
Right.
life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? Like those are, and property, right? These are rights that God gives to us that are not granted by a piece of paper. And so obviously I understand being like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can against that. You know, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen here, but that's less about tariffs and more so just about cultural decency and you know, promoting goodness. So a lot of times when we implement these tariffs, who suffers? Like when you know, it's funny that I have to have this argument with the right because I'm used to having it on the left. Because
Right.
usually they're like, well, what's wrong with blowing up a pipeline? And I'm like, well, when they cut everybody's power, whose power are they going to cut? Do you think the dictators are just sitting over there in darkness being like, can't play my video games anymore? No, of course not, right? Like they axe the power from the downtown area, right? Like, and they're just like, okay, well, I guess those guys don't get power anymore. And so I understand, like, you know, I'm sympathetic to the lefty argument. We don't want people burning holes in our ozone layers. Sure. You know, we don't want people, you don't want greedy capitalists profiting off the backs of common resources. Totally understood. I totally understand that. But we got to keep in mind what our actions do. I think as much as I am an anarchist, one of the reasons I get along so well with mainstream figures is because I am practical. And it's not that, I think when a lot of anarchists say that, they kind of are admitting that anarchy is not practical, which is actually not what I mean. But what I mean is I want to take actions that actually get us in the direction of freedom,
Right.
and as opposed to actions that take us away from there. It's not enough to just identify problems, because in that case we've had some amazing figures throughout history at identifying problems, and they've all done some horrifically evil things. That if it was just a matter of identifying problems, it's just not good enough. We've got to actually do things
Right.
that actually fix the problem. And markets are such a wonderful thing. It's very simple. They're very
Wise.
they're everything. I mean, really, I can't tell you what a market is because it's whatever people want it to be. It's if you want a good, the market's going to try to find a way to get you that good, unless it interferes with somebody else's goods, you know,
Yeah.
and that's a
Well,
wonderful thing.
well, you know, Hody, just to emphasize what you were talking about, I saw something today that I think is interesting. So President Trump and Scott Besson and the blondie girl at the podium who makes all the announcements, I forget her name. Uh, they announced today and they said, guess what? As the result of being one of the greatest presidents ever, one of the greatest deal makers in history, China has now committed to President Trump to buying $12 billion worth of, or 12 billion metric tons, whatever the measurement was, of soybeans. And I said, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. So I did some research. Here's the research. China was buying 24 billion worth of soybeans from the US as of January 2025, meaning the Trump administration, through its policies, however well intentioned you think they may have been, resulted in China not buying as much soybeans from our American farmers. The fact that they're now up to 12 billion sounds like an accomplishment because it's up from the 8 or whatever they were doing. But from the point he started his ridiculous tariff policies, it's still down 50%. If you go back to the original Trump tariffs against China in 2018, China was purchasing in 2018 30 billion worth of soybean from us. So you just on evidence alone, and by the way, this isn't something I had to dig up. This is something the Trump administration, for some reason, is proud to herald. Like, hey, they just agreed to 12 billion. They were at 24. And before that, they were at 30. You have literally chopped them down to next to nothing. And as if to prove our point, the people who suffered, if you don't care about the Chinese who would consume it, is your American soybean farmers, your soybean producers.
Mhm.
Because you've just and how do you keep them happy politically, Hody? You have to subsidize them. The government has to now subsidize them, or else they'll never vote for you again, which is exactly what the Trump administration did in his first term, and they're doing it again in this term, right? So we have to understand that it's not what you say and what you intend to do. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, as many folks have pointed out. You have to look at what it actually accomplishes. Okay, I'm off my
Yeah.
soapbox.
The soybean example is really good. If you're wondering at all what Big John is talking about, I encourage you right now to look at soybean farmer. Just type soybean farmer videos and just watch. Like, it's in a really bad place right now. And some of these guys have had their incomes, that like their yields cut by over like 50%. Like
Yeah.
it is wild to see what we're doing there. Wheat, we increased the floor of wheat, and so you'd think, oh well, now it's cheaper to buy it overseas, and then all the places that we would have imported it just put these tariffs on them. What we're
Right.
doing with farming is such a joke, and really, even if you don't care about soybean farmers, man, we're feeling it at the grocery stores. Like
Oh
you'd be
yeah.
surprised
Look at
how much
beef
is there.
prices. Look at beef
Yep.
prices. I mean, that go no further than that. I mean,
Tri-tip steak is like $10 a pound. Nightmare stuff, man. It's
oh,
killing me.
that's why I love the like these right wing talking bobbleheads like Tammy Lauren and people like that who get on and they start complaining like America first means protecting our farmers. No, no, no. That's what got you into this mess in the first place.
Right.
Like let them compete. We're in the biggest market in the world. Let everyone compete. We'll all be fed and we'll all be rich. Let just go by that. All right, everyone. We've talked enough on that. Loved having everyone join us here for Free for All Thursday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. As always, this is Big John, joined by my friend and co-host, Mr. Hodey Johns, that the Ho Man. Give him a follow on X at the Ho Man. Give me a follow at Big John _ SXM. But if you kind of want the official channel for the official show announcements and everything, go ahead and follow us. It's all down there on the crawl at Distant Warrior on all the major platforms, at Distant Warrior. Follow us or subscribe. We would really appreciate it, and it really helps us out. Until next week, when we'll do this all over again and maybe have a guest or two. Peace, everyone.